Sydney's median home deposit just hit nearly $260,000. Let that sink in. That's just the down payment, not the house, the deposit. Ask anyone under 40 in Australia what their biggest frustration is, and you'll hear the same exhausted answer. Buying a home feels impossible. Not hard, impossible. These aren't lazy people. These are nurses working double shifts, teachers like Sam saving every single dollar, IT workers skipping holidays, people doing everything they're supposed to do and still falling further behind. Here's what makes it worse. Deep down, they know it's not their fault. They didn't break the system. But by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why this happened. And more importantly, what actually needs to change. Because the story behind this crisis isn't what most people think it is. Let's get into it. A generation ago, buying a home was just what you did. You worked, you saved, you bought. Simple. In the 1990s, the average home cost about 4 times the average income. You could save for 3 or 4 years and have a deposit. Now, it's 11 times. In Sydney, it's 15 times the average income. Think about that. In 1990, if you earned $50,000, a home cost $200,000. In 2025, if you earn $50,000, that same home costs $550,000 in many Australian cities. So here's Sam again. He's 29, he's a teacher earning $90,000 a year. That means a median home in his area costs around $990,000. To save a $260,000 deposit, just the deposit, at $1,000 a month, it would take him 22 years. He'd be 51 years old. And that's assuming nothing goes wrong. One medical emergency, one job loss, he's back to zero. Meanwhile, his parents bought their home in 1995 for 3 times their income. They paid it off. Today, that same home is worth $1,200,000. They didn't get richer. The system got rigged. This isn't about wages rising too slowly anymore. It's about prices rising so fast that ordinary buyers don't have a chance. The finish line doesn't just keep moving, it's accelerating away from you. But here's the uncomfortable question. Why did prices explode like this in the first place? Somewhere along the way, Australia's entire economy became dependent on one thing: house prices going up. Properties stopped being a place to live. It became the engine that runs the whole country. Here's how it works. When a house rises $100,000 in value, that homeowner doesn't just feel wealthier, they can borrow against that equity. They renovate their kitchen, extend their house, start a business, or buy a second property. That borrowed money flows through the economy. Banks make money, construction companies thrive, small businesses get loans, super funds invest in the rising values. Governments collect more tax. Everyone benefits when prices climb, so nobody in power wants them to fall. Over 60% of Australia's household wealth, more than any other major developed economy, now sits in real estate. That means if prices drop even 10%, ordinary Australians don't just feel poor, they are poorer. Retirement plans crumble, banks get nervous, politicians panic. So even during downturns, the government steps in to support the market. Translation, hold prices up so the system doesn't collapse. They can't afford for prices to fall. The entire country is betting against first home buyers. Which brings us to the investors. Because if the system is rigged, the investors figured out the cheat code. First home buyers often feel like they lose in a competition they never agreed to enter. That feeling is correct. In some suburbs, nearly 1 in 3 houses is owned by an investor, not a family living in it. Think about that. If you're trying to buy a family home, you're bidding against people who are just collecting properties. And those investors have advantages that ordinary buyers could never dream of. Let's meet Marcus. He's 35, owns his home outright, and he's just bought a second property as an investment for $500,000. It's a rental. Here's where it gets absurd. The rent Marcus collects is $20,000 a year, but his expenses, mortgage interest, rates, maintenance, property management, add up to $22,000 a year. So Marcus loses $2,000 on this property every year. Losing money should be a disaster, right? For ordinary workers it would be. But Marcus gets to claim that $2,000 loss as a tax deduction. If he earns $100,000 a year, his taxable income suddenly becomes $98,000. He gets money back from the ATO. He gets a tax refund for losing money. Meanwhile, Sam, the teacher, is saving his $1,000 a month by cutting back on groceries and skipping nights out. When he saves $1,000, he actually loses it. It doesn't earn him a tax break. It just sits in his account. So Marcus, who's already wealthy and already owns property, gets rewarded for losing money. Sam, who's struggling, gets nothing for saving. That's not a market, that's a system designed to punish people trying to get in. But wait, it gets worse. When Marcus eventually sells that investment property, let's say it's appreciated to $650,000, he made $150,000 profit. Normally, that would be $150,000 in capital gains that get taxed. But Australia has a capital gains tax discount. He only pays tax on half of that profit, $75,000. So he saves thousands in tax on his windfall, while Sam saves $1,000 and gets nothing. These tax breaks exist, and politicians know they push prices higher, but undoing them would anger millions of existing homeowners. So, the system stays exactly as it is, and with every passing year, the gap between those inside the market and those locked out grows wider. In 2020, everything changed. The pandemic hit. Central banks around the world, including Australia, slashed interest rates to record lows. Mortgage payments that felt impossible suddenly felt manageable. You'd think that would calm the market down. It did the opposite. Meet Jenna and Tom. They're a young couple, both working, both nervous about missing out. In 2019, they were saving for a deposit. Then, interest rates plummeted. Their mortgage broker told them they could afford $600,000. They panicked. Everyone was buying. Prices were already rising. If they didn't act now, they'd never get in. So they rushed. They borrowed more than they'd planned. They bought for $580,000, thinking they were getting a deal. Jenna and Tom weren't alone. Investors added second and third properties to their portfolios. Families upgraded to bigger homes. First home buyers like them panicked and rushed in. Everyone was competing at once, and sellers were asking for more because they knew buyers were desperate. From 2020 to 2022, some regions saw prices jump 40% in under 18 months. Sydney went up 30%. That's not normal market growth. That's a frenzy, and it happened because cheap money flooded into a market with a fixed supply of homes. Then came the rate hikes. Starting in 2022, the Reserve Bank raised rates aggressively. Mortgage payments surged. People like Jenna and Tom, who'd borrowed aggressively, now faced $1,000 a month higher mortgage payment. Families were squeezed hard. You'd think higher rates would cool prices down, but something weird happened. Prices barely dropped. Why? Because the real problem was never the cost of borrowing, it was that there simply weren't enough homes to buy. You can slow demand with interest rates. You can't fix a housing shortage with interest rates. You can only make people poorer trying. In Australia's shortage? That's the real heart of this crisis. Here's the brutal truth. Australia simply didn't build enough homes for nearly 2 decades. Experts estimate the country is short by at least 175,000 homes right now, and that number is still climbing. The gap started small, then grew, then exploded. Planning approvals take forever, sometimes years. Land releases get tied up in politics. Building materials became insanely expensive. Construction companies collapsed from the financial pressure. Skilled workers, electricians, plumbers, carpenters became impossible to find. Then, at the exact moment Australia needed a massive building boom to catch up, the construction industry was struggling to stay afloat. So when demand exploded in 2020, supply didn't move. Meet Priya. She's a 31-year-old nurse. In 2022, she was ready to buy. She had her $200,000 saved. She was ready to make an offer. But there were 3 other offers on every single property she looked at. Competition was brutal. She'd show up to an inspection with 50 other people. She eventually bought for $50,000 over asking price just to get something. Now she's locked into a mortgage at 6.5% interest rates, and she's stretching to make payments. If Australia had built more homes, if there'd been 10 properties available instead of one, Priya wouldn't have overpaid, she wouldn't have been panicked into rushing, she would have had choices. But she didn't. And the problem gets even stranger when you look at geography. On a map, Australia looks enormous. It's almost as big as the United States. Surely there's room, right? Not really. Most of that land is desert, bushland, or just uninhabitable. Nearly the entire Australian population is squeezed into a narrow coastal strip. Despite having one of the largest land masses in the world, less than 3% of Australian land contains almost 90% of the population. People live on the coasts because that's where the jobs are, the transport is, the infrastructure is. Everyone wants to live near Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, and Adelaide. But that's where land is most expensive. And it's getting harder to build there, because zoning laws make the squeeze even tighter. Let's meet David. He's a local councillor in an affluent suburb of Melbourne. It's a beautiful area, tree-lined streets, big houses, good schools, but it's running out of room for young families. David gets pressure from long-time residents who say, "We need to protect neighbourhood character." What that really means, we don't want apartment buildings, we don't want young people, we like our suburb exactly as it is. So the council votes to block new development, they cap density, they require giant blocks, they make it hard to build apartments, townhouses, or anything that could house more people affordably. Who does that protect? The people already living there, who own property and watch it appreciate. Who does it hurt? Young people trying to get in, and people being pushed further and further away from jobs, towards the sprawling suburbs at the edge of the city, where they face 2-hour commutes and still pay $800,000 for a house. It's a paradox. Australia is enormous, but ordinary people are trapped competing for tiny pockets of livable space. And the people who already own that space vote to keep everyone else out. When you zoom out, the story is brutally simple. Property values were allowed to rise for decades while wages flatlined. Workers like Sam expected to own a home by 35. Now they're saving until they're 50. The government saw prices start to rise and didn't see a problem. They saw an asset. Over 60% of household wealth is in real estate. If prices fall, voters lose wealth. So governments stepped in to support the market. Translation, hold prices up, even if it means keeping young people locked out. Investors figured out the tax code and realized they could lose money and get rewarded for it. Negative gearing, capital gains, discounts. Every incentive pointed toward buying more investment properties, not toward letting first home buyers have a chance. The wealthy suburbs near the city blocked density to protect their neighborhood character. What they really protected, their property values. Everyone else got pushed further out. The immigration rate kept climbing. 500,000 new residents arrived in 2022 alone. Every new migrant typically needed housing, and they concentrated in the same expensive job hubs, creating fierce competition for limited stock. Meanwhile, foreign investment in residential property was eating up more homes that could have gone to local buyers. Rents had skyrocketed too, with some areas seeing increases of 15–20% in just 1 year. Piece by piece, the system tilted away from ordinary people and toward people who already had property. The whole thing was designed to reward people who were already in the market and punish people trying to get in. Yes, but only if things actually change. Right now, pressure is finally building from the bottom up. Younger voters are angry, politicians are starting to listen, cities are experimenting with loosening zoning laws, they're fast-tracking approvals for new housing, they're investing in public transport so people don't have to live near the city to access jobs. If Australia treats housing as a necessity, not as an investment game to make existing homeowners richer, things can change. Reducing migration numbers and zoning reform works. When you allow denser housing near jobs and transport, you don't need to wait decades. You can build faster. Prices don't skyrocket the same way. Other countries have done it. Parts of the US, parts of Europe. When they loosened zoning and allowed more building, housing became more affordable. It's not magic. It's just supply and demand. But here's the thing. It only happens if enough people demand it. Politicians won't upset existing homeowners unless voters force them to. And that's where you come in. The truth about why you can't afford a home in Australia isn't a reflection of your effort. It's not because you're not saving hard enough or you're not disciplined enough. It's a reflection of a system that's been tilted against you for 20 years. A system that rewards people who already have property and punishes people trying to get in. A system that treats housing like a commodity to be traded instead of a right to be secured. But the more people understand how it happened, the more pressure builds to make it right. If this video helped you see the bigger picture, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what housing looks like where you live. What's your story?